This is the Team Objection podcast for October 15th, 2020, episode 457. And in it, we're going to settle one debate once and for all, even though it really can't be settled once and for all to begin with, and probably shouldn't be until one of their careers is over, because we might change our minds later. But it's time to go into the GOAT debate. The NBA Finals just finished. The Lakers, unfortunately, I'm not saying this is anti-LeBron, just anti-Lakers, won. And as a result, the debate has begun once again. It's kind of funny it happened in the same calendar year as The Last Dance coming out, but as a result, everybody's still talking about it. So why not just compare and contrast and decide who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? And it's important to note, we have to take definitive stances on this. It can't be like, well, they're both pretty good. Of course they're both pretty good. They're 1 and 2 all time, in my opinion. But
my definitive stance is like directly against the idea of having a stance.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
No, but I'm going to get to it. I'm going to try, and I'll tell you why. But I at the very least, I want to explore. Otherwise, it's a very boring show. I think they're both great, and then it's okay. Well, now we've burned. I do want to say how amazing it is, though. Now that we're here, we speculated, and it's arrived. The NBA bubble worked. No cases. It's over. We have crowned a champion. The legitimacy of which we can talk about. Because that's been a debate too. Well, does it really count if it was in a bubble?
Counts more.
Yeah, it does. So I just want to say, this illustrates again to me why the NFL is the worst league maybe on the planet. They don't care about their players at all. It's all a paycheck. It's all what can we do to get our money. They have no value in their players. All the domestic abuse stuff doesn't matter. CTE, try to put it under the rug. COVID, they're like, yeah, but can you like gather a roster to take the field? It's okay if y'all get it. We just need to make it to the end of the season. Are you going to do a bubble? No. Are you going to like reduce the game? No. They don't care at all. And it's like amazing how they're allowed to keep doing this. I hate it. And I know I'm like going to sound like my dad with the NBA, but like I want to like actively go against the NFL now. What is it going to do if I don't watch them? Nothing. But like, I hate them. And so I'm going to use my platform that 50 people listen to be like, I hate the NFL.
Well, I mean, I'd say baseball is rapidly approaching and horrible management.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're pretty bad. The one thing I'll say in the NFL's defense, because I agree with you on a lot of what you said, is that they are kind of, at least on the surface, trying to right some of their wrongs. Baby steps, I guess, is the best argument.
Well, like how? What are they doing? Tell me.
I mean, they're first of all not distancing themselves from like something like Colin Kaepernick or players' voices anymore. They're actually allowing some players to have a voice as opposed to being soldiers in rank and file, which they've done a little bit. That's one. They've enacted a lot of different rules to take care of things like CTE and have strict protocol amongst that. Did they act way too late? Yes, but at least they're starting to.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
there's
here's what I want to say. Actually, I feel something happening, and I'm going to stop it. What I would like to do next week, I would like to do to be continued, is actually like compare and contrast the NBA and the NFL, which now, crazily to me, kind of are the two biggest sports empires in America. Like before, it was baseball was always in the conversation. I don't really feel like that's the case anymore.
Not close.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
I do want to focus. This just happened. I want to get us back to Jordan versus LeBron.
To your point real quick, though, yes. I don't know that any of us who are the most optimistic would have thought 0 cases.
No.
Yeah.
0 positive cases in basically 4 months. 0. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams would have been like, yeah, we're going to have absolutely nothing. Like maybe a couple. Like their best case scenario would have been handful of cases, identified quickly, isolated, kept from spreading, and doesn't result in any delays in play. 0 cases. It was to the point where by the time about the second round of the playoffs started, I forgot COVID was a thing in relation to basketball, which is remarkable.
Yeah, right.
There were more games missed due to protest than there were COVID cases.
Like, was baseball and in the NFL were both starting up, they obviously both got hit by a slew of cases in different ways. With the NBA, the thought was that was going to happen going in, and instead you kind of waited with bated breath, like, okay, well, we're through the 8 playing games, but something's going to happen, right? And I got to the point where I didn't even consider the possibility anymore. And that is just, it speaks volumes to the NBA being very proactive. We've already talked about that on the show, about how they're definitely leaps and bounds ahead in that regard for sure. And whatever Adam Silver and his core of medical experts and the other people around him decided, it worked.
Well, and so it's interesting because I think the COVID, the bubble argument for LeBron, for me, it's sort of pro and it's sort of con, but not really con. I don't take it away from him at all winning in the bubble. The only thing I'll say is I was reading a lot of articles of like the fact that he managed to win in the bubble is even more impressive. And I was like, I don't necessarily agree with that either, though. If LA was like the only one in a bubble and they had to figure that out, then that's one thing. But everybody was in there together. Everybody had to figure it out. So it's like they were all in the same circumstances. I think it's admirable no matter how you cut it. But like that was kind of the weird thing. It was like I was reading some things of saying LeBron had like more mental fortitude than everyone else like this year. I was like, well, that's not exactly the case. But it's a tremendous effort that they all did. It was like 3 months for the teams in the finals.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue like Donovan Mitchell had to have more mental fortitude than LeBron did because he had a teammate start the whole thing, caught it himself, and then had to figure out how to play with that guy. So I think that argument's a little silly. There's a lot of dumb arguments about this, and I think it's rooted in the fact that people just want to be right about it. I think it is a slight improvement that he won it in this format. Not a huge one, like you said. Everybody was subjected to the same conditions. But the Lakers walked into this without Avery Bradley and most of Rajon Rondo, who came back later on in the playoffs, and had to basically adapt to a rotation with no guards in it. And LeBron was the leader in assists per game this year, and the responsibility for that fell primarily on his shoulders. So I think he gets slightly more credit in a bubble year than he would otherwise.
Yep. I think you can say that, historically, because of what they had to deal with, maybe that's why it's elevated a little bit comparatively to other years where it wasn't. Other years it wasn't. No one had to deal with this before in history. Yeah. So that's something in his favor.
Now, if there had been COVID cases in the bubble and, if the Clippers didn't make it to the Western Conference Finals, but if they had, if Paul George and Kawhi Leonard had missed the conference finals because of COVID and the Lakers steamrolled them to make it,
right?
Now we start talking asterisks, because that's not necessarily fair to LeBron either, but that would be kind of undeniable. Like, okay, this is something that would never have happened in another year. It wiped out the competition and left him this clear path. But the stuff that happened to the other teams was all kind of normal. Like, Dragic got hurt. Players get hurt. It happens.
Yeah.
So, you can't really hold that against anybody.
Yeah, you want to put it. You want to make the Raptors championship not worth as much because Kevin Durant got hurt. I mean, like I said, injuries happen. It happens. I think I heard 3 out of the last 6 champions have all had some sort of injury happen to the other team.
Yep.
So
that's correct. The Raptors and then the Warriors, of course, were both on the plus side and the minus side of that. So it happens. It happens.
So, Chris, you have a comparison sheet pulled up.
I do. Dave doesn't know about this yet.
I think this is So we're going to get to the core of my debate here in a moment. Depending on who you are, these stats will matter or they won't. But I think let's go through them for the people that it does matter for.
Mm-hmm. We can give a quick primer. It'll be on the screen if you're watching on the video. If you're not, we'll kind of go over it aloud as well. But anyways, this is what the new format affords us. So I thought, why not find a fun comparison chart? It was more in-depth than I thought it would ever be.
Mm-hmm.
So LeBron and James, Michael Jordan. You know about their names. We talked about them a lot this year. I kind of wanted to do this as this final cork in the bottle of, we're not going to say the words The Last Dance again this calendar year. It's banned from the show. But this is our final chance to talk about it. And as such, we got to put the debate to bed.
Yep, we're never doing it again. Buzz off.
This is LeBron's 4th championship. Michael still has 6. I don't think that number is going to improve. Maybe he'll be driven out of retirement by some weird circumstance, but I think we're pretty safe on Michael having 6. LeBron, who knows? He won this year. Who's to say he can't do it again? We'll see.
I like the idea of LeBron wins his 6th ring, and Michael Jordan says, at that point it became personal for him, and he comes out of retirement.
He comes back.
I don't doubt. I mean, he'd have to get back into shape as far as cardio. He could give you like 10 minutes a game, even at 50,
mm-hmm.
I bet.
Oh, yeah.
He can still shoot. He can't get to the hole the way he once could. But in this league with this perimeter defense rules, he could give you 8 points a game off the bench in 12 minutes. I don't know what his defense would be like anymore.
Not great.
But, because I know he is this competitive, if he decided that he would ever do this, there's no way he would half-ass it.
No.
There are some players who might try for one last season to, latch on to a ring or something. That sure as hell isn't Jordan.
Yeah.
And I skipped over the first thing, which I suppose is still relevant, which is the timelines here.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a couple of gaps in Jordan's, which is, I think, part of the primary problem with trying to compare these two is that Jordan missed a couple of years of his prime and then a little bit of his subprime. And LeBron, of course, came in earlier than Jordan because he came straight out of high school and is going to endure longer than Jordan did, which means that I think a lot of this can boil down to peak versus longevity. Dave has made this point as well. We'll get there. But
I actually want to watch a movie about that. A Michael Jordan or Michael Jordan equivalent comes back to win one more championship at 50.
They made it. It's called Mr. 3000.
I know. That's very different, though. That would be like Michael Jordan needs to come back and make a shot over the course of the season. So, the longevity thing is interesting because Jordan did take breaks, but there's a lot of people, including some of his own teammates, that feel like had he not done that, we would not be looking at 3-3. We would certainly not be looking at 8 straight either. It would be very different. Maybe you squeeze a 4th straight in there, but then they don't just keep winning. He was at the end of the first three-peat, he was like drained.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, that '94 year, there was a lot of good. The Bulls had a lot of good players on them, but the rest of the league was really, really good too. I mean, okay, take it back. The rest of the league wasn't great, but the top teams of the league were very good, I would say. The Rockets, the Knicks, like those types of teams were really good those years.
Could that team have beaten the Rockets?
absolutely.
Yes. Could they have beaten them as a 4th year straight of going to the finals?
Yeah, that's the issue. Does that same team that was on the court against the Suns beat the Rockets in a 7-game series? I think so. I don't think it's that close, to be honest. I think the Rockets are one of the weakest champions of the last 30 years. Not that they're bad, but that they're not one of the strongest. But would they have had that same interest, having already completed the three-peat, being another year more tired, playing 100 games in the season? That's certainly open to debate.
Mm-hmm.
So the longevity stuff starts to matter when we look at the summation of their careers. Seasons, LeBron's got 2 more than Jordan now because, again, Jordan had gaps. Playoffs, LeBron's got 1 more now. All-Star games, LeBron's got 2 more now. Some of these are starting to stack up just because LeBron's had that longevity, because otherwise, if you compare, if you take Jordan's best 15 years and LeBron's best 15 years, then they look pretty similar in a lot of these numbers. But you can't just do that. LeBron has played more than Jordan, and that does matter.
Mm-hmm.
So we scroll past this obnoxious ad in the middle, and we get down to some of their awards and honors in their career. This is where it starts to get kind of interesting. MVPs, you can argue both of these should have more.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah.
They are guilty of a thing that's hampered the MVP discussion throughout the history of the award, which is at a certain point, voters get tired of the same person winning and sometimes vote for somebody else. And as much as I hate to admit it, Charles Barkley is one of the beneficiaries of that.
Mm-hmm.
Karl Malone's one of the beneficiaries of that. And I think Dirk Nowitzki might be one of the beneficiaries of that, if I'm being very honest. I don't think he was undeserving, but it probably should have been LeBron that year, if we're being honest.
Dirk's year should have been Nash. It was.
That is true.
Maybe.
That's a bigger beneficiary.
Statistically, that is probably Nash's best year, but I'm not surprised whatsoever they didn't want to give it to him.
Yeah.
No,
well, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But anyways, 5 for Michael, 4 for LeBron. You can argue both should have both. That's what they have, but they should have more, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, we're right on. Michael has more in a shorter amount of time. LeBron, I would say, has better competition around him, theoretically, to win these MVPs. I mean, they're good players in Jordan's time, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. There wasn't an athletic freak like Russell Westbrook, a scoring machine like Kevin Durant.
Well, and again, but the nature of the award being something where, like you said, if you win a lot, they don't want to give it to you anymore. And if you have a player who leads his team to the 8th seed, but averages a triple-double, well, that's a feat. So we're going to give him an MVP. Was he actually the MVP, most valuable to the team that, matters? No.
Yeah.
But, so the nature of the award is what that contributes to that as well.
Of course. I mean, I think you could argue that Jordan could have won the MVP every year from 1990 to 1998, of course, without the 2 years that he didn't play. Every single year, he probably should have been the MVP. LeBron probably should have been the MVP 2009 through 2016, maybe. I mean, he's been consistently the best player in the league, and everyone's been kind of, he's the best player in the league. maybe he didn't have the best season every year, but he's the best player in the league. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. LeBron, you could think he might have at least 6 that he should have, right? At least.
Yeah.
Jordan, I mean, what? At least if we're gonna do the same thing, 7, 8.
Yeah, I mean, he
We
scored.
just talked about 2.
Dude scored 37 points a game in 1987, but the Bulls finished 2 games below 500 because they were garbage trash.
Yeah.
So he didn't really get strong MVP consideration. I think Magic won it that year.
And
He was
he
going up
probably
against
should've that
Magic
year,
and
though.
Bird in
Yeah.
those 80s years. So let's not pretend like he had no competition then either, all right? We have to be a little careful with that argument. I agree LeBron's faced stiffer competition, but particularly the first half of Jordan's career when he was putting up bigger numbers, but his teams weren't as good, he was not exactly in position to win many of those.
No, and I mean, to Dave's point, though, like, it's almost like you could argue LeBron had weirder competition where, like, no one's going to choose, if they're playing pickup, Westbrook over LeBron. But Westbrook did this really weird thing. He had the perfect situation to get, like, a triple-double. And
James Harden. Weird
Yeah, James
stats.
Harden had a season where he 90% usage rate or whatever it was.
Yeah, James Harden just scoring. No defense, nothing, but scores like crazy. I really don't think probably should have been the MVP that year, if I'm being honest, because of that type of player. But
This is a wash to me. They both won about the same amount. They both could have won more, maybe about the same amount. Similarly, Finals MVP is basically how many finals have you won? They were the MVP each time.
And I would argue LeBron actually deserves a 5th Finals MVP. That year that Iguodala won it, I could argue that even though even though LeBron lost, he was still actually the most valuable player of the finals because that team wouldn't have made the playoffs without it.
If they had pushed that series to 7, I would be on board with you. They didn't, and thus I can't see giving it to the losing team. When I think Curry should have won it. If we're being completely honest with you, that's going to be a stain on his legacy now.
They get gimmicky in those Finals MVPs sometimes.
And look, we all know that putting Iguodala in the starting lineup was a huge linchpin in that series. Like, it mattered. I don't know that he had the numbers to really justify Finals MVP over 6 games.
Well, I think Chris, you brought this up before. I think if you take Iguodala off that team, the Warriors still probably have a good shot. If you take Steph Curry off the team, there's no way.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Even if he's not shooting particularly well, the gravity that he creates and the playmaking.
Taking Curry off that team is worse than taking LeBron off with a healthy Kyrie and Kevin Love, in my opinion.
With a healthy Kyrie and Kevin Love, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because, again, the Warriors system is so centered on Curry and his distributing and his shooting and everything he can do. Take that, like, what's Klay Thompson going to do with no Steph Curry? What's Draymond Green going to do with no Steph Curry? We saw it last year. It was trash.
And Chris, ultimately, I agree with you, but I do, Dave, that's an interesting point because LeBron was dragging down the corpse. Someone brought it up, and I was like, oh, damn, that's right. Dellavedova was the second best player on that team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is trash.
It was bad.
LeBron has played with some garbage teams, no question, and deserves some credit for elevating them, but it's also the reason why I think he has the biggest blemish on his record that we'll get to.
Yep.
Rattle off the rest of these real quick. They're about the same on all NBA first teams. LeBron's got Jordan by 3. Same with all NBA teams, about the same idea, not surprising there. Jordan has LeBron beat on most of the defensive metrics, which I think makes sense. Jordan was known as a lockdown defender, and LeBron has that capability, but because of the workload he carries on offense, has never really shown it consistently. He was much better this season than he has been the last 2 or 3 years to me. I think we were at the point where I was going to start considering LeBron to be a slightly minus defender. Like, some of the first season Lakers highlights of him just being lost on rotations and stuff and effort-wise was not good. But he really responded in a big way this year, so props to him for that.
Yeah.
And you could argue Jordan probably deserved more Defensive Player of the Year awards as well. At least a couple more. For what that's worth. But yeah.
I don't know if I'd ever think that LeBron was the best defender in the NBA.
No.
Oh, I mean, for stretches, absolutely. Like when he locked down Derrick Rose that year, where Rose won the MVP, and he locked him down. That was incredible.
If you're dribbling down on a fast break, and there's one player I would name that I don't want chasing me, it's LeBron James.
Yeah. Over Jordan or anybody else.
Yeah, I think so.
Period.
Yeah.
Scoring titles, Jordan has LeBron by a massive margin. Now, granted, you could argue LeBron, if he wanted to, could have won 10 of these. I don't know about 10. So could have certainly won more than 1. That's not his game. That's the magic in him.
No.
Yeah. At the end of the day, though, Jordan did it 10 times and LeBron's done it once. So it means something. Not much, but something.
It's different. I mean, that really, I chalked it up so much more to different styles of play because Jordan was that assassin scorer. LeBron is more of the passer. He's more of he's got the basketball IQ that I've always liked. That's always what I've respected so much about him, is his basketball IQ.
Yep.
Yeah. LeBron just led the league in assists this past season,
Incredible.
which is interesting for a 36-year-old.
Yeah.
Jordan never did and never came close. That's also a little bit of byproduct of the era when you had one point guard who was the distributor back then. So, like, Jordan was never going to win an assist title with John Stockton in the league, and neither would LeBron, if we're being totally honest, because LeBron just did it with a hair over 10, and back then 10 was like maybe top 6 or 7 in the league per game. 10 per game assists. Now that's enough to lead the league. That's not to take away from LeBron's accomplishment. It's just a little bit different than back then because team distributing is more value than it was back then. But either way, Jordan was never going to do it. So moot point. Steals leaders, ties the defense. LeBron has LeBron has 0. Jordan has 3 of those. And they both won Rookie of the Year. So I don't.
They had one shot and they got it.
Yeah, they both did it. And that became personal for them. And also, I don't think it was even remotely close in either case.
Oh, no. No, not at all.
You can go further into this. I can just put them on the screen as we kind of talk so people can see them. I don't really want to go into all the numbers because we can kind of just summarize each player by what we already know. LeBron's the better rebounder and distributor. Jordan's the better scorer and defender. So these numbers bear out what you would expect from that comparison. But there they are on the screen so you can see them. They're pretty interesting and not that far apart, to be honest. Like, you can look at these and see a gap. But for the most part, they bear out, like I just said. LeBron, a little bit better rebounds and assists. Jordan, better scoring and steals. They're identical in blocks almost.
LeBron's got the better totals just because he's played longer. You know?
So you go down to total, and that's to be understood. You give him 2 extra seasons, and he has a little bit better numbers, but they're close, and that's not really a difference to me.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to feel, because we can go down here with percentages and stuff and, like, whatever, but...
I mean, I know we need to make a definitive choice here, but everybody that calls, like Stephen A. Smith was on TV earlier and said, like, there is literally nothing LeBron can do to make him overcome Michael Jordan, I think is a ridiculous take because, okay, he wins the next 3 championships and wins one at 40. Like, really? You still not even consideration if something like that happens?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's almost right, though. And here's why.
And because it's feel. That's right.
If he were to win the next 4 championships, okay, then that starts to get into something that's abnormal. But that's kind of my point. Stephen A. Smith, I don't always agree with him. He's actually right, because for the people who care about the feeling of Jordan, nothing LeBron can do is going to change that invincibility that Jordan had. Mm-hmm. I mean, we even saw it in The Last Dance. The people who like Jordan, you know, it was pretty real, and you could be like, oh, wow, like, never meet your heroes. But instead, most people still defend him. They kind of double down and they're like, well, that's okay. That's what it takes. Or, you know, he had a reason for whatever. They're apologists for him. And it's because of the impact he had. It was the time that he played. It was in elevating the game. It was the legend that he created, all the ties with the advertising and everything else. Like, he played at such a time where if you care about the feel and the myth, yeah, I mean, really, there is nothing that Jordan can do, that LeBron can do to overtake Jordan. So that's like one subset of people, and no matter what you tell those people, you're never going to change their mind, because in their head, he is just bigger than life. And they care more about the image than necessarily the on-court stats. And so what do? It's almost like, in a way, these type of people are ignoring stats sometimes just to be like, I just like what Jordan did for the game, for what he represented, the gold medals and all of that. You know, I don't know.
So LeBron comes out and scores 102 points in a game next season and sweeps through the playoffs. Sorry, I felt Jordan was better. Like,
Jordan didn't have these hand check rules, you know. So if he did, he would have scored 45 a game. Yeah,
except for illegal defense, and I think people overlook that a lot. There's a picture I saw today of how in the 2018 finals, I think, when LeBron made that pass to George Hill before he got fouled, before the infamous J.R. Smith's fuck up. The Warriors are basically defending him 4 across the middle. And, like, go ahead, LeBron, drive on this. Or at the end of Game 5 when LeBron passed out, there were 4 defenders on LeBron leaving everybody else. that type of stuff was much easier to avoid back in Jordan's day because you had to hard double or stay on your man. There was no zone, there's no floating like there is available now. So it makes a difference. Granted, the hand checking did equalize that a bit, but still.
There's also the counter argument to that, which is it didn't really matter as much back then because there were so many stiff, slow people around the basket that you could effectively clog the lane against Jordan anyways with the rules that existed at the time, which is fair to some extent. I mean, you can see how just terrible the spacing is back then. There is no concept of it. So every time Jordan goes in, he's going to have to drive around his man, and then like Luke Longley's man, and then probably Horace Grant's man, and then maybe he gets to the basket then. But the difference I mean, both these guys are more similar than I think anybody wants to give them credit in these discussions. Both of them had unreal athleticism relative to what the league had on average at the time. The way Jordan could effortlessly get by people to get to the rim and put pressure on the defense was unlike anything we'd seen back then. And LeBron, of course, is just a football player in a basketball player's body. He's a unique physical specimen that we haven't really seen duplicated since then. Like Zion's kind of freakish in his own way, but even though it's been 17 years since LeBron came in the league, we haven't really seen another person, even with his body type, come in. No,
not this tight end and just who can bowl over everybody, but also definitely move around you.
Yeah. But you know what else is similar between the two that doesn't get brought up? LeBron's more of a competitor than I think he gets credit for either. Now, he's not been punching teammates in practice and stuff, but he'll get on teammates a lot, and it's been happening more and more as he gets older to where he'll just kind of publicly start yelling at them during a game about a lapse in a rotation coverage or not getting back on a fast break. He's got a little bit of that Jordan side of him in him too, just not to the extent where he's, starting fisticuffs for no reason.
I feel like people rip on him for that almost. Like they feel like he's crying to his teammates or yelling at him. I've seen people actually get upset with him, but say he's not as good as Jordan because he yells at his teammates. I'm like, wait, what? It's anything you can discredit.
Well, everybody's too hypocritical. I mean, the pass to Danny Green is like Jordan would have never passed it out, and he's like, Jordan did pass it out. It's like two really big ones that I can think of.
It's amazing, though, right? How that shapes the arguments, because that was 110% the right play. I texted Dave as much that night, and any criticism of that was extremely stupid.
Yep.
However, it also has to be pointed out that LeBron's failures in the finals do come on his shoulders to some extent because it never happened with Jordan, and those big shots that happened weren't in elimination games. So when Kyrie hits that shot, that saves his championship because that's game 7. If they don't win that game, they lose everything. If Paxson misses that shot, which by the way were the only non-Jordan points of the entire fucking fourth quarter, so thank God somebody hit a shot for him because he was the only one who had scored at that point. But to your point, he did hit the shot Jordan trusted him to, so that does count. But they had game 7 still. Maybe they lose that game. For the Suns' sake, I certainly would have hoped so, but we don't know. We do know what happens if they don't score those last 4 points in game 7 against the Warriors. They lose.
Or Ray Allen doesn't hit that 3 in 2013 because
they lose.
Oh my God.
That's what's the hardest part.
Yeah, that 3 doesn't go in. I think everyone looks at LeBron differently.
So it's not... Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just saying, in that fourth quarter, he was incredible that entire fourth quarter up until the last minute where he turned the ball over twice, and that's all anyone would remember.
Yeah,
would be those sort of two numbers.
That would be unfair, but you're absolutely right that would be the narrative. But that's the biggest issue. It's not even just Jordan's invincibility, but it's LeBron's, to make up a word, vincibility, because of those two specific finals where you can make the case he could be 2-8 in the NBA Finals, and that's an awfully hard thing to have on the resume of your greatest player of all time, whether it's fair or not.
Yeah.
4-6, at least you're like, well, he lost more than he won, but you can talk about some of those shitty teams. The San Antonio sweep is a little gross, but again, that team was garbage, so it's hard to put that on LeBron's shoulders.
Yeah.
But what I come back to as I make my vote here, because we're almost out of time, I told Dave this in the text thread too, but 2011 is really tough for me. And I'll just preface this by saying this 4th title now is the first time that I have considered that LeBron might be better than Michael. I wouldn't pick him at this moment, but it is close. Before this, 2011 was a blemish that I could not overlook because you could not blame his teammates, and the loss that they suffered that year against one of the other worst, best championship teams of the last 30 years is squarely LeBron's fault. He is why they lost that championship.
8 points in a finals game is unforgivable in that instance. Scoring only 8 points and just being passive as can be in that. I agree with you. That 2011 is the biggest blemish he could possibly have.
Yeah.
Well, so how many championships did Kareem have? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
7?
I'll look.
So the issue for me is this.
6.
Yeah.
Tim, how do I say this right? This isn't even a debate, which sounds harsh, but either you care about, when you say the greatest to ever play, you care about the persona and the image and the legendary status, right? Or you don't. And if you don't, then it's almost not even between LeBron and Michael anymore, that you have to start talking about a Bill Walton or Kareem, who have more titles and more success and things like that.
Or
so
Bill Russell.
yeah, that's what I meant, not Walton.
Yeah,
at all.
I figured.
Hold
Hold on, I gotta go get the door. Keep going. I'll hear you.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't want to get too logical about it. I get it, but it's like you're either looking at one or the other, and you can justify both. But in either one, it's hard to say LeBron is the greatest. I will say I appreciate the off the court contributions that LeBron has made. Definitely more than Michael. I think it was in the same article you sent me, Dave, where they said Jordan like set the bar for athlete neutrality. Mm-hmm. And LeBron has made statement after statement after statement. And I think that matters, but it doesn't matter to me in this sphere of who's the greatest to play. I know it matters to some, and that's fine. That would be, to me, the only thing that you could say markedly LeBron has done
I don't need these.
The best. You know?
It's such a... the problem is it comes down to feel, so much so. Because what I'll say, Chris, you're right, completely right about the 2011 blemish that he's out there. And Shaun, you're right. Look, Michael Jordan was a non-human, basically. He's the one who stretched his arm out and beat the monsters to save the world, basically. Like, I say that in jest, but like that's kind of how people look at him, as the savior of basketball, almost.
Well, and his life is like a movie. Like, he hits a game-winning shot in college. He wins a national championship in college. Comes to the NBA, 2 3-peats, vanquishes his foes. Like, and it's funny because you, for the same reasons you would look at LeBron and rebuke him, you would look at Jordan and be like, look what he overcame. He overcame the Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons, and it's all just like this narrative that we weave for him, and that it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I look at LeBron, I see some sort of overcoming as well, just in a different method. As bad as 2011 was, 2012 for LeBron was redemption. That I told Chris before, in Game 6 of that against the Celtics, he almost, I won't say all, but he washed away that narrative of 2011 because his entire career was on trial. Basically, his ever even hoping of approaching top 10 all time was on trial in that Game 6, and he put up 35 points in the first half or whatever it was, and basically silenced everyone and said, I am the best player in the world right now. Quit saying I'm not. Quit saying I'm not one of the best ever. Like, and from then on, he's been this hyper-focused, basically what everyone wanted him to be the first 8 years of his career, basically. And I don't know, so many of the knocks on LeBron, like his 4-6 record in the finals, the fact that he brought some of those teams to the finals is amazing. I don't know how Michael Jordan would have done against the Kevin Durant Warriors. I wish we could have a time machine to see how the 96 Bulls do against that Kevin Durant Warriors team, because I don't know how well they're going to do against them, really. But I don't know. It comes down to feel, and I would probably have to say, I'll probably say Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player ever, with the caveat that LeBron is the best at playing basketball, which is a point I think I've made before. But it's Michael Jordan's the best basketball player ever because of everything else. But LeBron is probably the best person I've ever seen play basketball.
It's interesting because you would say, like, I agree that I think Michael is the greatest still. If you ask me who could I draft at a young age to be the backbone of my team, it's not necessarily Jordan, and I think that's where it's like an interesting thing. But you just said he's the greatest player of all time. Yeah, but there's a lot that goes into that.
It's interesting, too, because if you really want to talk longevity, that's part of why Kareem would be in that discussion, because he's even more extreme than LeBron. Was it 23 seasons or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And maybe that's my own bias from really never having watched Kareem play, but to me, it's one of these two for sure. I will say this. If LeBron manages to win a 5th title, that might be enough to put him over the top for me.
It's so hard for me to judge it only on titles, and maybe at this point in his career it does, but like knocking LeBron for not winning against those Warriors teams or not winning in 2007 or something like that is tough for me. Like getting there is such an accomplishment, and when you basically have no chance because your team is just so overmatched, when you are the best player and the next 5 best players on the court are on the other team, like that's just something so hard to overcome, and Jordan never had to do that.
Could be.
So
I'm going Michael.
It's tough.
Dave's going Michael barely.
Yeah.
If you go to Shaun, I missed it because I had to leave for a minute.
I did go Michael. Because I think the field does matter when you say the greatest player. I think that's inherently a loaded thing of like, you know, I don't know a lot about golf. I imagine there's a chance that someone has better statistics than Tiger. But my guess, greatest golfer of all time, would say Tiger because of the accomplishments, but also the impact. Like I think that matters when you make a statement like that.
Yeah, I would take him by a hair over Nicholas.
It is interesting to have this conversation about some of these people whose careers are not over yet, and that's honestly something that almost helps Michael so much. Is there is a finality for him. There is, I know what his career is, and LeBron, you can make the argument of, well, he's not done. He may do this. He may do this. We can't have, the book isn't closed yet. So that's what's kind of the most interesting thing about having this. And the fact that LeBron is in this conversation without that book being closed is really a benefit in his court, I think.
Yeah.
I will say if he wins another couple titles, if I agree if he wins them the way that he won this one. I think people were saying, "Oh yeah, what's it going to matter if he wins with Anthony Davis?" And, you know, assuming that Davis is going to carry the load. Well, no one can argue LeBron did not pull his own weight in this one. So if that continues to be the case, you know, yeah, definitely it'll be a conversation. I think it'll still come down to the whole feel thing. But then what's interesting about that is now when you look ahead another 20 years looking back, you guys both touched on this, both of their careers are over. They've been solidified. They've been given time to kind of grow this legend. Space Jam 2 will be out. That's going to be huge for LeBron. So yeah, we'll revisit this when we're 50.
Episode 1475. I don't know. Jesus. It's a lot. I don't want to do the math. I don't want to think about it. The last thing I'll say is this. We talked at the beginning about how he was 100% right to pass out that ball to Danny Green for that 3. Imagine if LeBron had hit that shot over 2/3 defenders and won a finals on it. Would that have been enough for some people because it challenges that feel that we've talked about? Don't know. It's a moot point. It's a hypothetical. It doesn't matter anymore. But you can't help but wonder a little bit if he hits some weird like fade away from 16 feet, driving to his right with defenders swarming him, kind of a la Book from the opposite side. Does that do it for people where you go, that was his defining moment of his career? Because right now it's the chase down block, which was really important to that game, but it wasn't like a game winner like we have multiple Jordan versions of. Maybe that could have bridged the gap. I don't know.
It's just hard because people are so entrenched. Like in that show, The Jump, you bring up even the conversation of is LeBron the greatest, and people start laughing.
People scoff.
And it's like, you know, I have my opinion, but I definitely think it's a interesting conversation. I think there is merit.
It's close.
I'm not going to laugh at Dave for even bridging the topic that maybe LeBron is the greatest. It is close, and it depends on kind of like your own values. It's certainly not just like an obvious answer.
And anybody who says it's not close is lying to themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Or anyone that says Kobe's better than LeBron is lying to themselves.
Yeah, you notice we didn't entertain that discussion whatsoever.
Weird.
Because Kobe absolutely was not.
Which
I don't even know if Kobe's top 10 all time.
Kobe, great. He's great. I mean, and he approaches some of that feel stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
he's the most Jordan-like player because LeBron isn't Jordan-like. He's more Magic than anything.
Yeah.
But Kobe's more Jordan-like, but he's not on that level.
That'd be an interesting debate to see if we ranked our top 10 NBA players. Would Kobe make it, even with the fact that we all grew up watching him a ton?
Would we
I don't know if he would.
The top 10 greatest players?
I think it'd be close. He's definitely top 15 for me, but I don't know if he's top 10.
Man, that's hard, though, because there's so many players I haven't watched a lot of, and I just have to basically go off of stats.
Could be a future show.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Alrighty, that's the end of this episode. In between shows, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, or the place you might be right now, youtube.com/objectionnetwork for the video version of the podcast and other videos 7 days a week. We'll see you next time. Jordan's the best.